Hello guys and welcome back to Raising Reef. I'm Rob Shaw, and in today's video I'm going to be updating you on my home system, this 200 litre mixed reef tank. I'm going to tell you how the corals are getting on and talk to you a little bit about some changes I've made to the filtration. So if you're new to this channel, please consider subscribing, as I put out regular content all about the reefing hobby to share my passion and experience in this hobby to help inspire you and hopefully improve your ability to keep a reef tank at home. So the first thing I want to talk to you about with this tank is my remote refugium. I grow macroalgae in there to help control nutrients, and I'm running caulerpa. I've had that in there now for about 4 months. And you can see daily growth on this macroalgae, and I'm having to harvest it out regularly in order to allow it the space it needs to grow, to continue to do well and suck the nutrients out of the system. It's been doing such a good job of this that I've had to address a small issue with low nitrates in the system. I started to experience a diatom bloom on the sand bed, which looks like a sort of brown dusty appearance on the top of the sand bed, not very attractive and can cause concern. Well, this is quite often the cause of driving nutrients down too low, causing a slight imbalance in the system, and these diatoms will flare up. Once you correct that issue, they usually go away quite quickly, and precisely that has happened. What I did to resolve my issue was I removed a biopel reactor that I've got running in my sump, which tumbles a plastic biodegradable polymer which is used as a food source for bacteria which grow on the outside of these balls, and as they reproduce they consume nitrates and phosphates from the water column, and they get shook off, and your protein skimmer will then skim them out of the water. I've now removed them from the system, so we're not relying on those to do any of that denitrification for us, and we're purely relying on what is taken out in dissolved organics as far as the protein skimmer is taken out, and the growth of the macroalgae, which we are then removing manually from the system. This seems to be the perfect balance for this particular aquarium, and you at home will have to find the right balance for your home aquarium and what works best for you. Some people need to booster their macroalgae growth with some additional filtration, and that's what I'd been doing up until now, but now that's taken off, we've readdressed the situation and removed those biopels. Previously to that, I was running a phosphate media in a separate reactor, and that has been also removed from the system. So for the last 3 to 4 weeks now, we've been running completely without any other filtration methods to control nutrients, and all of the nutrients in the system are taken up by the coral growth themselves, the macroalgae and the protein skimmer. So let's move on to the livestock in the tank. I have had I've got a slight update for you on one of my corals. I have a frag of strawberry shortcake which I've had for probably 10, maybe 11 months. It never really did a great deal. First of all, I put it in and I was overlighting the aquarium, so it did go a bit pale and it never really showed its colour. I then lowered down the lighting, and it started to colour up. It never really grew any new growth tips, although it did start to base out around the bottom of the coral. Two things have happened which have caused this coral to take a downward turn, and that's that the low nutrients in the system in the form of nitrate have inhibited its ability to grow or heal, and it was being overgrown and possibly stung by some zoanthids that were growing very close to it and encroaching on top of it. I got to these a little bit too late. I did peel them away, but they'd left sort of a dead patch of the coral which quickly spread across the coral and wiped it out completely, so I have actually lost a coral. One thing I'd like to point out to anyone that's new in the hobby or hasn't experienced coral loss before, it is something that does happen in the hobby and it isn't avoidable. Some people may go for years with never losing a coral. I've done it myself, but on occasion a coral will give up and die, and it's just something that you have to accept in the hobby. Obviously, if all of your corals start dying, you've experienced a major issue in your water quality or some contaminant in the water, and this needs to be addressed quickly. If you have, say, 50 corals in your tank and one of them doesn't look like it's doing very well, I wouldn't be making any hasty decisions about changing things about the system. Maybe try relocating that coral, or put it down to experience that coral may have already been dying when you bought it, or it may just not be enjoying the conditions that you've provided it with. Try to concentrate on the positives and not dwell on any of the negatives, because this is a hobby at the end of the day and it's supposed to be enjoyable. So one thing that's doing really well in this tank is this torch coral. I picked it up, I actually saved it from a client's tank that was practically dead. It had barely any flesh left on a part of a polyp, and I brought it home. I didn't expect it to live. I just wedged it in the rock and left it to its own devices. Fast forward probably 10 months, maybe a little bit longer, and it is rampant. It grows very quickly. It's continuing to split heads and grow new heads, and I'm really pleased with it. The problem that I've got with this coral is that it's a bit close to some of the surrounding corals, and these big sweeping tentacles are stinging some of the corals around it. I've managed to put it into a position quite close to the glass, and it is still stinging a coral on this side and that side, but nothing major that is going to cause me to lose any particular piece. Both of these pieces, I have others elsewhere in the tank, so if they did suddenly take a downturn, I could replace them. That seems to be doing really well. All of the other corals seem to be doing okay. It always was a temporary holding tank for the corals that I took out of my big 6-foot aquarium when I shut it down a few years ago now, because I was looking to move house. The house move continues, so this is still a temporary tank. I have a new tank set up, ready to go. Once we get the green light for moving, that will be the tank that all of this stuff gets moved into in the new property. So what's new with this tank other than what I've mentioned? Everything seems to be growing well. The alkalinity swing that I had a few months back now caused a few corals to die, which I mentioned in a previous update. The replacement acroporas that I have at the top back of the tank are doing really well. The half of the colony that died, the remaining half has spread right back out and is nearly as big as the previous two colonies were before. And the small colony that I lost the whole entire colony of, the replacement frag that I had, luckily a piece on my frag rack, has been repositioned and is spreading out nicely. So all of that is going really well. The scroll coral that I bought a few months back, which didn't seem to enjoy time in my tank, started to recede and was just a few little pieces left on the coral. I broke that up and I remounted it all. Some of that coral seems to be now growing some new edge around it, so that is spreading back out, which is a positive sign. I'm looking forward to that growing back into a nice coral, and everything else seems to be doing quite well. This tank does continue to only have 3 fish in it. It has my 2 mating clowns and a sulphur goby. I don't plan to add any more fish to this tank at this current time. As I said I'm moving house. The least amount of livestock I've got to move when the time comes, the easier it's going to be on me. So one little thing that I've been doing recently is I've been lighting some corals 24 hours a day. I didn't intend to do this initially, but I had a frag of the frog spawn coral that I grow in my tank, which I've got in multiple spots around the tank, and I had a small head that was on my frag rack, but it was getting sort of shaded out and pushed to one side. I decided that I would just pop it into the refugium and see how it got on under the lighting in there. It seems to be doing alright, but when I replaced the chato with some caulerpa, I had to light the refugium 24 hours a day. And that means that that coral has now been for 4 months under 24-hour lighting. It's interesting to see how well it's coped. It hasn't grown a great deal. It is probably twice the size it was before. The polyp is a fair size. It hasn't grown or split or created any new heads, which tells me it's not as happy as it might be in that environment. But it's interesting to see that even lit 24 hours a day, these corals seem to be able to adapt. There are also a couple of mushrooms in there that don't seem to be having any ill effect from being lit 24 hours a day, but I thought it was a fun little experiment to do to see how well they get on long term, and I will continue to monitor it for as long as I've got the tank running with 24-hour lighting on that refugium. And I'll update you in the future if anything happens. So if one of them dies or it takes a turn for the worse, be interesting to see. This light isn't particularly powerful. I think I've got it set down as well, so it's on a lower setting on the controller. But it being at a lower setting for a longer period of time seems to sort of stopped it from causing too much of a problem with the coral frags. But we'll see how that goes. It's just a little bit of an experiment that I was trying out to see how that went. So is there anything else I can tell you about this tank? Not really. I think that does it for today. Like I say, there will be a lot more videos coming out as and when I get the go ahead to move tanks and move house. I will be doing a video on how I move the tank to its new location. I will talk you through all of the process and my best practice for relocating a tank, and I will show you that step by step as it happens. So if that's the type of content that you'd like to see more of, don't forget, subscribe and help this channel to grow. Thank you for watching, guys. Take it easy, and I'll see you in the next video.